Hey, it's Greg Schweitzer, Chief Catalyst and founder at Catalyst Transformation Institute, and I've got a question for you. The question is, are you getting what you want? I mean, you're putting in effort, you're doing the work, you're trying, but is your kung fu working? Are you getting what you want? This is such an important question because you don't need me to tell you, because you've probably already experienced, that when you put a lot of effort in and you're not seeing progress, you're not seeing the result that you want to have that makes a great life and a great business, it's debilitating. It's taking the wind out of your sails. It's a lack of motivation. And you didn't sign up for that, did you? Well, here's how I want to help you today. I want to share with you today the 4 factors for helping you to get anything that you want. Okay, this is the 4 factors for getting results, the 4 factors for getting what you want. And I want to begin with something that may seem very obvious, but I got to tell you, it's probably one of the most critical pieces. Let's begin. It's called getting started. Now, here's an interesting concept about getting started. I know it sounds rudimentary, it sounds basic, it's like no kidding, Greg. But what I'll tell you is that most people, when they're actually trying to begin creating some sort of result, oftentimes jump right into action before they give consideration to 2 things. Their mindset around getting started, because when that's right, then you become uber powerful and unstoppable. And the second piece is, what are the resources that are necessary for me to get this result? Truth is you've probably been thinking about getting a particular result for so long that you feel like you've already started, because there's been a lot of brain power and maybe a lot of emotion in that whole piece. But let's talk about what's the key concepts of getting started that are really going to help you maximize the outcome and the results that you're looking to get when getting what you want. First one. It's called purpose. It's called purpose. When you see yourself and you think about what it is that you're after, what is the end result, what is the achievement you want to have, ask yourself the question, I want that for what purpose? Because what this does is this really digs down into something you've probably heard of called a why. Okay? Now you've heard of the term like big why, or what's your why, or start with why, and all of those are good things with one exception. People have a tendency to overcomplicate purpose, overcomplicate their big why. They feel like maybe they have to have this massive why that covers the whole of their life and everything involved. And I gotta tell you, we're around for a really long time, and our desires and our whys change from time to time. So let yourself off the hook. You don't need to know everything that's gonna happen and everything that you intend for every minute or every year of your life. Let it go. But you do know what you want right now. And I want you to be very, very clear about that, because when you look at the next piece of this right here, it says what you want specifically. This is absolutely critical when you're determining what's happening, and there's 2 major things that you need to know about. Number 1, what are your personal values? What are your career values? What are the things that you value? Another way to ask yourself this question is, what's important to you about life? What's important to you about career? What's important to you about health and wellness, right? And when you get really clear on those values, only then can you make great decisions toward what you're going after. The second piece is actually, what does the ideal life look like for you? Have you sat down? When was the last time you sat down and mapped out, like literally wrote down all of the things that are absolutely essential for you to have the ideal life? Like everything you've been working for and pursuing for years, maybe even decades, are you really clear what that is? Because until you are, you're aiming at a moving target. And that's where we get exhausted and don't see the outcomes. So get really clear and very specific as to what you want. It'll really serve you in a lot of ways. The second piece about getting started that I want to introduce you to is also a key element and friend to us, but it has its limitations too, and it's called willpower. You see, as a human person, you've already been endowed with what we call human agency. And agency or willpower is really the ability or the capacity to make things happen, the capacity to choose. Wow, that's really powerful. That means that you don't have to be stuck with whatever you have or whatever circumstances you're in or whatever you currently believe. Isn't that awesome? Simply because you're a human person and you've been endowed with agency, you now have the power to change whatever it is that's not working for you. Awesome. So how do you use willpower in a way? Well, number 1, willpower is essential for getting started. Like, you can think of all the actions and you can think of all the results that you want, and you can even dream on those kinds of things, but until you actually begin, until you take the first step, nothing's going to happen. The other piece on here is that you see my rudimentary drawing of a vehicle, a car. Okay. Now, I don't claim to be the best artist. It's not one of my geniuses, but I have a good time being able to create some stuff. And as you can see right here, this car is moving. It's moving in a direction. And what's interesting is when you get into a vehicle to get started, you got to understand a concept. And that concept is that you can't steer a parked car. It's really good. I got to say that again. You cannot steer a parked car. Okay. In order for you to change the view, if you don't like what you're seeing in your life or in your business, in order for you to change the view, you've got to change directions. And the only way for you to change directions is to push on the gas, i.e. get started, right? That makes sense. It seems logical. And yet there's often times when we're sitting there and we're looking out this view out of our window and we're seeing it, and we're not totally completely loving it, or maybe we're not liking it at all, and we're dreaming about something different, but it never changes, right? It never changes until we push on the gas. Good news, life and business allows U-turns. Like, you literally can swerve and move and change directions. But until you get started, until you execute your willpower, it's not going to happen. The last key piece about willpower is that willpower fatigues like a muscle. So if I were to say, hey, drop and give me 10, you might be able to get to 10. You might be able to get to 100. I don't know. But at some point in time, your body's going to go, sorry, man, that's all I got. Okay? It's going to not be able to do any more. And our willpower is very much the same way. And so in order to leverage willpower in the most effective way for helping you get what you want, you need to use it to begin, and then you turn over those processes, those actions, and those thought patterns, you turn them over to habit, which is a very powerful piece. So willpower is the next piece about getting started. So what do? Once you got started, right? Use your willpower, you know your why, and your purpose, and your desire, and your values, and you get started, then what? Well, it's not enough. Getting started does not get you to the end result. There have been so many people I've talked to in their life that talk about regret in their life because they got started, but they didn't complete. They got started, but they didn't continue on. For some reason, things didn't work out. This is what I call building momentum. It's beautiful to put the key in the ignition and get the car started. But until you push on the gas, and how you do that is really critical, and I call that building momentum. So let's talk about what momentum can look like, because you may not know this, but if you watch Cape Canaveral and NASA send a shuttle into space, it's a magnificent thing to watch. The amount of power and energy and the crazy genius of being able to engineer all of this to happen is phenomenal. They spend millions of dollars and years at a time just to be able to get started, but they also planned for momentum. And if you take a look here at my beautiful, amazing, artistic Leo, whatever his name is, Da Vinci. Okay, that's my drawing right there of a space shuttle. If you look right here in the center, this kind of triangular looking thing, that's the space shuttle. You can imagine your little astronauts in there if you want to. Okay, and what's interesting is that that's the place where they do all their work. That's the place where they do all their mission and so on. But when you look at these two major tubes, these humongous tubes, I mean, if you look at these in real life, they're incredibly massive. Those are full of fuel only. That's their only purpose, is to house fuel. And the reason is because they need massive amounts of fuel. Once they start the engine, right, they need massive amounts of fuel to get this bird up into orbit. As a matter of fact, space shuttles, right, like this scenario, will spend 96% of the fuel getting the ship up into the sky and into orbit. And then with the remaining 4%, they can do all of their work, continue all of their rotations and orbits, and get safely back to Earth. This is so powerful, because when you're getting started, it's going to be so important for you to spend the fuel, at least at first. Because you spend the fuel and you get it going, and then you turn it over to habit. Then you turn it over to processes and systems, right? Over to a time block schedule so that it maintains. And that takes so much less energy, like 4%, right? So awesome to be able to do, okay? So allow yourself that ability, allow yourself that time and energy to spend the fuel and get going, all right? Second piece about building momentum. Time on task over time. I had a mentor in my life, a coach, if you will, who introduced me to this concept, and it was a game changer for me. And until you actually give yourself over to this, it's hard to see the true value. But you see, you know what time on task looks like, right? It's like, I just got to do the task. And then I get to show up again and do it later, or do it again tomorrow, and then do it again the next day, and then keep doing it for months and months and months. And that time on task over the course of time, like months, weeks, days, years, hours, whatever it is what ends up making momentum happen. It's where you start seeing things come to fruition for you. But here's the deal. When you're building momentum, and if you've spent the fuel on something other than the right tasks to spend time on, you're going to build a lot of momentum in a direction that's not getting you what you want. And that's why we're talking today, is to help you get what you want. As a matter of fact, it says right here that you can build momentum in non-productive activities. Like, you can do the wrong thing and have lots of momentum and speed about it. And this is what's the difference between busyness and productivity. We can be busy doing a lot of things and have not much to show for that. And when you wake up from that, you're just kicking yourself, and it doesn't feel really good. So make sure that you've aligned the right activities that are going to get to the result as long as you continue to do them over time. And then allow yourself to spend the fuel and keep going. Look at that. We've already gotten through 2 of the 4 factors of getting what you want. Number 1 is getting started. Number 2 is building momentum. And number 3 is when you begin to put on the effort and spend the fuel, I guarantee you, because you probably already know this, because you've experienced it, interference shows up, right? You go putting your best efforts forward. You might even feel like you're getting somewhere, and then all of a sudden, you take one to the gut. Something takes the wind out of your sails, or at least gets in your way, or tries to cause a hiccup, or some version of that, right? And overcoming interference is one of the best skills that you can have, because, yeah, you can get started. And you might even get pretty good at building momentum. But if you can't take the hits, if you can't handle the interference that shows up, this is not about strength, okay? This is about strategy, okay? Too often when we're pushing towards goals, whatever they are, we feel like we have to be more than we are. I have to be stronger than I don't know if I can be. And it's not only about strength, it's oftentimes about strategy. So when you're talking about overcoming interference, you know that this stuff shows up. Number 1, just being aware and acknowledging the fact that, hey, as I get going with this thing that's so valuable and important to me, this result that I want, something's going to happen. Something's going to show up, and it's going to challenge me in some way, shape, or form, big or small. But you see, winning's done by what you can handle, not just what you can cause. Okay? Because we can cause a lot of cool things, but that doesn't mean it's always going to get us there. So how do we do this? Well, one of my favorite ways is what I call bob and weave. That is probably the best picture I've ever drawn in my life. That is a boxing glove. Hopefully you can tell. Okay, that's a boxing glove. But in the world of sports like boxing and martial arts, it's not just about your strength, and it's just not about the punching or the kicking, right? It's not about the attack or being on the offense. You've got to be able to bob and weave, right? Move and slip some of those jabs and some of those crosses and those punches and those kicks, that kind of thing. Because if you take them all, it doesn't feel as good, and it may make it harder for you to win. So how do you bob and weave? What do you need to do? And just like when we talked about the vehicle that you can't steer a parked car, that you can actually be turning left and right, then unless you're bobbing left and right or up and down or whatever it might be, you might take on more than you need to take on. So get good at handling interference, deflecting it, or getting it to miss you altogether. Having a little foresight, see it coming. Okay? The next piece here, which ties into bobbing and weaving, is really the concept of being teleological. Ooh, fancy word, being teleological. All this simply means is that, the best way to describe this, if you take a look at this is we'll call this a rocket, like a bomb, a missile, if you will, okay? And if a missile is shot off, it's been given directions, like a longitude and a latitude, or at least a target, X marks the spot, right? At least a target to go for, and it's headed for that direction. And most of the time it gets there, or at least some of the time it does, okay? What most people don't understand, though, is that once that missile is shot out into the air, it's going to receive interference too. Interference like wind or weather or who knows what, right? Different things can happen that'll take it off track. And so what normally happens is when people think that a missile is shot and it goes straight to its target, boom, it's over with. Actually, what's happening is this thing is constantly adjusting. It's constantly bobbing and weaving so that its path actually looks more like this. Right? At any given moment, it can be off track, so it comes back on, and a little adjustment here, and a little adjustment here. So once you've spent the fuel, okay, once you've spent the fuel getting started, now that 4% of fuel is left for you to do just a little bit of this and a little bit of that to weave back and forth, and that's what it is to mean teleological. You, as a human person, are endowed with that ability to be teleological. It means, good news, you are not stuck how you are. You are not stuck with what you have. You're not stuck in your circumstances. You're not stuck with your results. You can then be teleological, adjust, and keep moving in the right direction. Don't let off the gas. Pretty good stuff, right? All right, so get started, build momentum, overcome interference, and the fourth one, completing. Right? What else needs to be said? There's more that needs to be said. Completing seems like a no-brainer. It seems like, well, yeah, you just finished your thing. But how do you do that? And how you do that matters. So let's talk about a couple of things here that are going to help you when it comes to completion, because there is nothing worse than getting yourself to get started and spending the fuel, right? I'm in, spend the fuel to build up momentum, and then get good at bobbing and weaving and being teleological, right? Avoiding and overcoming interference, and then not finish, not get it. Really? It's not worth it. One of the keyest things for human motivation and human satisfaction, because that's what you're after, right? Ideal life, satisfaction, achieving what you want, all under the same name there, is coming through. Like when I am able to come through, there's nothing greater than the satisfaction of having completed something like that. This is about keeping a promise. And honestly, it's about keeping a promise to yourself. My guess is that you have certain feelings about keeping promises to people. Like when you make a promise to somebody, your full intention is to follow through on that promise, right? That's right. How are you doing on your promises to yourself? If this is you going after what you want, the 4 factors of getting what you want, how are you doing on keeping your promises to yourself? How are you doing on keeping your promise to get yourself started, to spend the fuel, to build the momentum, to bob and the weave, and to stay the course until this thing is complete? It's a good question to ask yourself. The other piece here is that you get the satisfaction of the job well done. And that's what I was talking about coming through, is that when you've completed something, when you've created a result, especially something that you really wanted to create, there is nothing greater than that feeling when you're standing in victory and you're feeling like, I did that. Yes, look at that. That's amazing. It does so many things for you. It improves your life. It strengthens your motivation. It gives you great confidence, increases your competence. I mean, you're now more endowed to be able to go do the next big thing that you want to do, something you might have thought you couldn't do before. You now are able to. One more thing about that, about completing. You need to understand the real purpose of completing, and it's really about progress. You see, people are after a particular result, and when they don't necessarily get that result right away, or there's interference that shows up, they fail to recognize the progress. Like when you begin a project, or you begin going after some sort of result that you want, you start here, and then if you get going and you get to about here and interference shows up and it feels pretty scary, like it's going to end, this is the problem, is that people won't look back and notice how far they've come. How far have you come already? Are you giving yourself credit for what you've done? Are you giving yourself credit for the progress? When you look at the studies of human behavior, human satisfaction, and happiness, right, what we call fulfillment, if you will, flourishing, progress is one of the major key factors. Progress / mastery, right? So if you're getting good at something, you're making progress on something, that makes us want to keep going. That makes us believe that we can get there, but not if you don't give yourself credit for the progress you've already made. Incomplete projects and tasks breed unrealized goals. And that's got to be one of the worst feelings you've ever can experience. So the 4 factors, right? The 4 factors of you getting what you want, of achieving the results that you want, are getting started, building momentum, overcoming interference, and completing. And if you'll follow that process and allow yourself to do that, it can be that simple to win. It may not be easy, but it can be that simple. Okay? You know I love you. Be great. It's what you're made for.